Hello, and today I'm going to take my reading from Medieval Britain in 100 Facts. This is from a series of books that Amberley do, which are great at giving little snippets of information about a period or a topic. So I'm just going to take a few of these that I think are quite interesting. Number 26. Time immemorial has a date. As England's legal system became more codified and people of all social rank became interested in the enforcement of their rights, many cases rested upon the notion of long use, claiming, for example, that sheep had grazed a patch of common land since time immemorial. This concept became a crucial legal matter. How could you prove that something had happened in a time of which there was no memory, living, social, or legal? By the 13th century, the concept of long custom was causing very real legal issues, and the disputes were irresolvable. The Statute of Westminster, issued in 1275, legally codified the date of time immemorial as the 6th of July, 1189. This was the date of the beginning of the reign of Richard I, the Lionheart, and his great-nephew Edward I set that as the point in law at which time immemorial began. The legal test is therefore whether a right has been held since the 6th of July, 1189. Where a long-established custom exists, the courts have stated that there will be a presumption that it was enjoyed since time immemorial unless it can be proven otherwise. So, curiously, time beyond memory, stretching into the ancient past, actually has a start date. Number 27. King Arthur, Guinevere, and Excalibur were discovered by Henry II. Gerald of Wales reports in his chronicle that somewhere between 1191 and 1193, Henry II discovered the tomb of King Arthur, complete with the legendary sword Excalibur. The first problem with this tale is that Henry II died in 1189, so the vague dating of the discovery makes it too late to have been made by Henry. Gerald insists, though, that King Henry II of England disclosed to the monks some evidence from his own books of where the body was to be found. So either Henry searched, but it was not found during his lifetime, or the information he provided inspired a posthumous search, or the dating of the discovery is a little out. The grave was discovered at Glastonbury, a place in Arthur's time called the Isle of Avalon. Gerald wrote that in the Old English this meant Apple Tree Island, for truly that place abounded in apples. The monks discovered the grave between two stone pyramids fully 16 feet into the ground, as many of Henry's sources had suggested it would be. Inside that grave was a large stone cross upon which was carved, "Here lies buried the famous King Arthur with Guinevere, his second wife, in the Isle of Avalon." The male skeleton was said to be of enormous proportions, and a lock of golden hair identified the other body as a female. There was also a sword within the grave, the sword of King Arthur, the legendary Excalibur. The monks at Glastonbury kept the bones in an ornate wooden chest, and pilgrims flocked to see them. Later, during the reign of Edward I, a black stone sarcophagus was placed next to the high altar, and the bones reinterred. The monastery was dissolved by Henry VIII, the last abbot hung, drawn and quartered for treason. There's no record of the fate of the bones. The stone cross which was found in the grave and identified its occupants was preserved and better documented. That doesn't mean it wasn't a forgery, but it's fairly well recorded by many chronicles over the following centuries. It was last recorded in the possession of William Hughes, Chancellor of Wales, in the early 18th century. Then it disappeared. What of the mighty Excalibur? The story goes that Henry's son, Richard I, gave the sword as a gift to Tancred of Sicily in 1191, which again throws doubt on the dates of the find. It would be an odd fate for the most powerful sword in English history and all that it represented to be given away to a foreign ruler. The financial rewards bestowed upon the monastery explain their part in the show. Henry II was under threat from rebellion in Wales, and the revelation that King Arthur would not return to save his nation was surely the king's motive for the discovery. The real fate of King Arthur remains a mystery. Number 28. Virtually all medieval people knew that the world was round. There's long been a perception that the backward folk of the medieval age thought that the world was flat and that exploration was limited by the fear of falling off the edge of it. An examination of writing stretching back even before the medieval period quickly and thoroughly dispels this myth. The Venerable Bede, who lived between 672 and 735, wrote very clearly of the orb of the earth, insisting, We call the earth a globe, not as if the shape of a sphere were expressed in the diversity of plains and mountains, but because, if all things are included in the outline, the earth's circumference will represent the figure of a perfect globe. For truly it is an orb, placed in the centre of the universe. In its width, it is like a circle, but not circular like a shield, but rather like a ball, and it extends from its centre with perfect roundness on all sides. Medieval writers continue to expound the belief that the world was a sphere, their work supplemented and complemented by the use of Arabic writings and research. Dante's Divine Comedy describes the world as a spherical body. Scholars such as St. Thomas Aquinas, Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, Michael Scott and others wrote of the earth as a globe throughout the 13th century. Cosmas Indicopletus, who travelled throughout India from Byzantium in the 6th century, is one of the very few writers to explicitly state that the world was flat, believing that the heavens formed a curved lid over the flat earth. Cosmas seems to have been in a club of one in his belief, and it had no impact on the popular consciousness. Illuminated manuscripts frequently show the world as a circle and show Christ holding a round earth. The large number of Mappa Mundi that survive from the medieval period, the most famous residing at Hereford Cathedral, invariably represent the earth as round, though, like modern maps and atlases, they are flat. Whilst they can't represent the world as a globe, they at least confirm the belief that it was circular. The first surviving globe dates from 1492, at the close of the medieval period, but it confirms that it was a demonstrably long-held belief. When Christopher Columbus set sail from the coast of Spain on the 3rd of August 1492, it's often considered a brave move in the face of the risk of falling off the edge of the world. The very fact that Columbus took the route west to try and reach the Indies proves that he knew very well that the world was a sphere. The risk was in being unsure of the size of the sphere and how long it might take to reach the Indies. Number 60. St. George was adopted as England's patron saint for his chivalry and to annoy the French. On the 19th of July 1333, the 20-year-old Edward III rode into the Battle of Halidon Hill against the Scottish army in pursuit of their country's independence. Above the young king's head fluttered the banner of St. George. It was the beginning of a relationship that would see the saint's reputation launched into legend. St. George was not English. He died in Palestine at the turn of the 4th century, a martyr, so the legend goes, because when the Emperor Diocletian ordered that all Christians within his army be arrested and that all others make a sacrifice to the Roman gods to prove their true faith, George presented himself to the emperor and declared himself a Christian. A son of one of Diocletian's advisors and a skilled military leader, the emperor didn't want to lose George, but no amount of gold or land would sway him. He was tortured and eventually beheaded for his faith. George eventually became the patron saint of Portugal, Georgia, Lithuania and Venice, as well as England. Much of his story is legend, Pope Gelasius counting George amongst the saints whose names are justly reverenced amongst men, but whose actions are known only to God. And his slaying of the dragon to save a princess is entirely apocryphal. The attraction of St. George to the military mind is clear. Unlike patron saints who champion the conversion of heathens to Christianity, George represents courageous martyrdom, the willingness to fight oppression and injustice and to die if necessary for a just cause. What could be a more fitting model for a knight? It is this connection that truly led to St. George's adoption as the patron saint of England at the outset of the 100 Years' War. St. George has long been a patron saint of all knights, a representative of chivalry and a knight's commitment to the pursuit of justice. The birthplace of chivalry and knighthood was France, and they were very proud of it. In 1346, when Edward marched an army to fight a much larger French force at Crécy, he did so under the banner of St. George. And he won. Edward had invested heavily in military technology, spearheading the use of the cannon, crossbow and longbow. He shot the French knights in their saddles before they could even begin their charge. This mode of warfare was so alien to the chivalric rules of the French, and so devastatingly effective, that it established England as the dominant military power in Europe for decades. St. George had abandoned the French knights in favour of the English. Edward III became responsible for the birth of an English national identity, as he unpicked the ties that had long bound England to the continent. He also adopted English as the official national language. Perhaps his most enduring gift to that new nation, though, was a saint who represented steadfast courage and determination in the face of threat and injustice. Number 61. Medieval proverbs stand the test of time. Many of the things we say are so much a part of our everyday life that we rarely stop to think why we might say them. Some of these sayings and proverbs can be traced back thousands of years and would have been uttered by the lips of medieval folk every bit as casually as they are today. Egbert of Liège compiled a poem entitled The Well-Laden Ship. It was a Latin work designed for beginner students trying to get to grips with the language. It contains early versions of nursery rhymes, such as Jack Sprat, and folk tales, including the earliest known version of Little Red Riding Hood. Egbert put his work together in the 11th century, and he added several proverbs that must have been familiar then and some that remain in use today. The Well-Laden Ship includes Latin reproductions of "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth," literally translated as "When a horse is offered for free, you should not open its mouth." "While the cat's away, the mice shall play," and "The apple never falls far from the tree," all of which are well recognised 10 centuries after Egbert wrote them down. John Warkworth, a London merchant who wrote a chronicle in the mid-15th century, repeated a proverb in one part that runs, "Such goods as were gathered with sin were lost with sorrow." Other proverbs included in the poem have not stood the test of time so well, but were probably well known to the medieval period. "A poor man extends his poverty when he has regular recourse to wine," seems to remain good sense. "The crow, by not crowing, could have the corpse to himself," offers wisdom for those who draw attention to what they have. "Calves should not play with an ox, as they are outmatched in horns," is a clear warning. "A living dog is better than a dead lion," seems a parallel notion to "a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush," which appears later in medieval literature. Other Latin proverbs appear throughout the medieval era. "He who serves two masters serves neither." "God meets every man, but few recognise him." "In God's sight, nothing ever remains unavenged." "Nature surpasses art without effort or anxiety." Some medieval proverbs were less than politically correct. "No mother-in-law is pleasing to her daughter-in-law unless she's dead" is hardly friendly, even if it raises some knowing smiles. "A good woman is rare. If by chance you find one, she fell from heaven" is hardly very charitable. Warkworth also used a proverb when recording the siege of St. Michael's Mount. "A castle that will speak and a woman that will hear, they shall both be won." One truth recorded in the Well-Laden Ship certainly stands the test of time. "Muck smells more foul the more it is stirred by turning over."